3 of our series called The Dreamers. And in week 1, if you are new with us this morning, just to give you a little recap. Week 1, we asked the question, are you ready to receive the dream? Peter stood up on the day of Pentecost. He explained that what they were experiencing was what the prophet Joel described. God was pouring out His Spirit on all people. Sons and daughters are prophesying. Young men were seeing visions. Old men were dreaming dreams. And in order to prepare to receive, we went back to Joel where this prophecy was. We looked back a few verses, and we said that in order to prepare ourselves to receive our heart, we need to return to the dream giver. And seek the dream giver, not just the dream, but to seek God. To release anything that we might be holding on to be absolutely surrendered, to be willing to receive whatever it is that God wants us to receive, and to rend our heart open to the idea of dreaming. And then week 2, we said, once you're ready, once your heart is ready, the next step is to discover your dream. And so last week we looked at Habakkuk, and we talked about positioning ourselves in a place to watch for what God wants to reveal. We talked about writing down the vision that God reveals to us. We talked about running with what He reveals and waiting for Him to complete the work that He has called us to do. And so the first 2 weeks were really foundational for the series. They really kind of set the series up for living out your God-given dreams. And for the rest of this series, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some different dreamers in the Bible, people whose dreams influenced who they were and what they did. So this morning, we're going to look at Jacob. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 28. But before we dive into Jacob's dream, there's a couple things we need to know about him. We want to get into his backstory a little bit before we get into his dream that we had. The first thing they need to know about Jacob was dreams were sort of in Jacob's DNA, if you will. They were in his family line. Abraham was Jacob's grandfather. Abraham got a big vision from God. Your descendants are going to be too numerous to count. You're going to give blessing to all nations. And Abraham, in Genesis 15, the Lord spoke to him in a dream. He fell asleep. The Lord gave this dream about this 400 years of slavery that his people would go through in Egypt. That was part of a dream. Jacob's father Isaac had visions. The Lord appeared to him in visions. One of them was at night in Genesis 26, where God says, "Don't be afraid. I'm with you. I'll bless you. And you'll increase the number of your descendants." Jacob's son Joseph, we look at him probably next week. He was referred to as the dreamer by his brothers. So dreams are not unfamiliar to Jacob. He's been around it for a while. And I've said in other messages that if you don't know what your dream is, I think one of the best ways to start is to get around people who know what their dream is, who are living it out. Because it spreads. It's inspiring. Those kinds of people can help. The second thing you need to know about Jacob is he's got some serious, how would I put it, family dynamics. We'll go with that one. He's got a twin brother, Esau. The Bible tells us that when his mom was giving birth to the twins, Esau came out first. And when Jacob came out, Genesis 25:26 says he came out actually grasping Esau's heel. So he was given the name Jacob. The name Jacob actually means one who follows on another's heels, or one who tries to take the place of another, either by force or by scheming. And when you get into Jacob's life, you realize that his name kind of matches at least his early part of his life. For example, when Jacob, in his early days, he gets his brother Esau to sell him his birthright. The birthright was the inheritance for the firstborn son. It was a double portion of inheritance. And Esau's out hunting one day, and he comes in, and he's starving, and Jacob's been cooking this stew, and Esau gets a whiff of it, and he says, "Give me some of that stew." And Jacob says, "First, sell me your birthright. I want your double portion." And Esau says, "No, just sell me, give me some of this stew. I'm starving, I'm famished." Esau says, "No." Jacob says, "No, sell me your birthright first." He says, "What good is my birthright if I starve to death?" He sells his birthright. So Jacob gets it. Later on, Jacob and his mom trick Isaac, their father, into giving Esau's blessing to Jacob, which doesn't make Esau very happy. Genesis 27:41 says Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near, then I will kill my brother Jacob." So just a little dysfunction, do you think? A little bit messy. And the reason I share Jacob's backstory with you is because I think sometimes we get stuck believing that the lie that only the exceptional people receive or accomplish their dreams. Or only the people who have it all together can be used by God. Can I just tell you, the only person in the Bible that had it all together was Jesus? And everybody else was flawed. Everyone else was a mess. Even people in the Bible we consider heroes. People like Elijah. I love Elijah. How could you not love Elijah? The guy calls down fire from heaven. He lays down on a child who's died and brings the child back to life. He prays that it won't rain, it doesn't rain. He prays that it will rain, and it does rain. The guy doesn't even die a normal death. A chariot of fire and horses of fire come down, and a whirlwind takes him up to heaven. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And yet, the scripture tells us in James 5:17 and 18, it says that Elijah was a human being, even as we are. He prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the land for 3.5 years. Again he prayed, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth produced its crops. I want to draw your attention to that point. Elijah was a human. Some translations say Elijah was a man, just like us. Read 1 Kings 19 sometime. He was a mess too. He got discouraged. When things weren't going his way, when he felt like he was the only prophet that was trying to live for God, he wanted to take his own life. Or he wanted God to take it from him. He said, God, I'm done. I wanted to quit. So keep Jacob's backstory in mind as we get to his dream in Genesis 28. Genesis 28, verse 10 says, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. Now, it's not that Jacob wanted to leave. Jacob had to leave. Esau wanted to kill him. So Jacob finds himself in a place where he can no longer stay where he is. And I think that sometimes, before we can discover the dream that God has for us, we need to get to that place where we can no longer stay where we are. I'm not necessarily talking about location here. I'm talking about condition here. Sometimes we need to be in that place of what I would call a holy dissatisfaction. That place where you can no longer stay where you are. That place where you no longer settle for the same old. That place where you can no longer be content with being complacent. It's that point where you say, God, I can't stay where I am anymore. There has to be more for my life. God, you have to have a vision for me. You have to have a dream. That's the place I'm talking about. Now I want you to hear what I'm saying here. Throughout this whole series, whenever I'm talking about dreams, whenever I'm talking about vision, whenever I'm talking about more for your life, it doesn't mean you have to have an enormous dream. You don't have to be like Elon Musk, the guy who runs Tesla, who's building a rocket to colonize Mars. I mean, it's okay if you have that, right? It's great if you think big like that. But I'm not talking about necessarily having enormous dreams like that. The more for your life could be a dream to be the husband that God wants you to be to your wife. It could be the wife that God wants you to be to your husband. The dream that God has for you could be to be the best mother to your child, the best father to your child, the best friend to your friend. It could be to give 110% in your current job so that you can get blessing, to do everything with excellence because it reflects the goodness of God, it reflects the amazingness of God. So what I'm saying, there could be more. I'm talking about being faithful with what God's entrusted you to, because if you're faithful with what He's given you, He'll be faithful to give you more. It's not always these giant things. Dreams don't just happen to big, influential, famous people. They don't just happen in big cities. When I talk about dreams and visions, it's not the size of the dream that's important, it's the source of the dream. If you're taking notes, write that down. What's important is not the size of the dream, it's the source of the dream. If the source of your dream is God, then your dream is never insignificant. Jacob moves forward in his journey toward Haran. He can no longer stay where he's at. Verse 11, we read, when he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head, and he lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. So the pillow becomes the pillar and serves as a reminder of the dream that Jacob had. The title of my message this morning is Keep It in Front of You. Keep it in front of you, a place where you can see it. In the Old Testament, when people experienced the manifest presence of God, they would often set up stones or set up pillars to serve as reminders of what God did, to serve as reminders for the vows that they were making before God. And they were reminders that they could keep in front of them so that they could remember, so that they could stay focused on what they had experienced or what they committed themselves to. Last week we talked about this when we looked at Habakkuk. God told Habakkuk, write the vision down. And I told you about that study that was done by the Dominican University in California, how they did a study and figured that people who wrote down their goals, shared them with a close friend, sent them email updates, weekly updates about how they were progressing in their goals, they were 33% more successful in accomplishing their goals. Why? Why are those actions helpful? Because telling a friend what you've written down and sending weekly updates of your progress helps you keep your goals in front of you. You can see them. We need to keep our dreams in front of us. This is what Jacob was doing with the pillar. He was setting it up as a reminder in order to keep the dream that he's received, in order to keep the vow that he's about to make here in the next few verses in front of him where he can see it. So in verse 20 we read, Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey that I'm taking and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear so that I will return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. I want to suggest that there are 4 themes that run through this vow that Jacob has made that are connected to his dream. 4 themes that Jacob keeps in front of him throughout his life. 4 themes that help him see his dreams through to reality. And 4 themes that I believe we need to keep in front of us if we're going to see our God-given dream on to completion. The first theme is this. It's the presence of God. The presence of God. In verse 20 it says, then Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me. I want you to notice this is a conditional statement. It starts with the word if. If. It means that Jacob understands that his success hinges on whether or not the presence of God is with him. The presence of God was absolutely necessary for Jacob to accomplish what God revealed to him in his dream. In fact, it was part of the dream as God revealed it to him in verse 15. God said, I am with you. And so I'm suggesting that in order to see your dream through to completion, you need to keep the presence of God always before you. It needs to be your focus. It needs to be your primary pursuit. Back in week 1 when we started the series, we talked a little bit about Moses going up on the mountain. He's on top of the mountain, he's receiving the commandments. The people are at the bottom of the mountain. They're growing impatient. It's taking a long time. So they took all their gold earrings, threw them into a fire, fashioned a cow, and said, here's our God now. To say that made God a little angry was probably an understatement. God was certainly not happy with them. And so we read in the Exodus 33, verses 1 to 3, God says, leave this place, you and the people you brought up out of Egypt, go to the land I promised. I will send an angel before you to drive out the people who live there. Then he says this in verse 3, but I will not go with you because you are a stiff-necked people and I might destroy you. So it's like God saying, I'll give you the dream, I'll give you the land flowing with milk and honey. I'll make good on my promise. I'll even send an angel before you to drive out all these other people that are going to give you trouble. But I'm not going with you because if I might go with you, I might destroy you. And so in Exodus 33, verses 15 to 16, we read, Then Moses said to him, If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? Get what Moses is saying here. He's saying that the distinguishing mark that sets God's people apart from the rest of the people in the world is the manifest presence of God in their lives. The difference between a man-centered dream and a God-centered dream is the presence of God. If God is not in the dream, if He is not present in the accomplishment of the dream will be indistinguishable from other man-centered dreams that might do a lot of good in the world, but there's no kingdom impact necessarily. The presence of God needs to be the primary pursuit. You need to keep it in front of you. Again, I said in week 1, don't seek the dream first. Seek the dream giver first. Make Him your primary pursuit. That's the first thing to keep in front of you as you pursue your dream. The second theme is also in verse 20. Verse 20 continues, If God be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking. Theme number 2 is the protection of God. You need to keep this idea of the protection of God in front of you. Jacob realizes that if this dream is going to become a reality, God's going to have to protect him from every potential obstacle that would prevent him from accomplishing God's dream for his life. Now this theme again, it's connected to what God revealed to Jacob in his dream. Back in verse 15, God said to Jacob, in the dream, He said, I am with you. I will watch over you. Now why is it so important to keep this in mind? Here's what I believe. I believe it's the reason that we need to keep this theme of the protection of God in front of us is because I believe that fear is the number one hindrance to pursuing God's dream for your life. Fear is the number one hindrance to pursuing God's dream for your life. Do I have any data to back that up? No, I do not. It's just a conviction. But it's a conviction that's based on the fact that do not fear is the most repeated command in the Bible. Over 350 times, there is some variation of the phrase, fear not, or do not fear. Some of the variations used over 350 times in the Bible. I think if God communicated this idea to us that much, we could assume, safely assume that fear is a big problem for us. Now, I'll get to why it's a big problem. Last Monday, I went to Elmira for the day. I was pretty drained after the Holy Spirit weekend. It was a powerful weekend. And last Sunday was powerful. And so I went to my special place I was telling you guys about. Went to Panera Bread. Posted this pic on Facebook. Said I am positioning myself to watch for what God actually said. I get like in a corner booth there. Then I got my coffee and I got my journal. And I'm like, God, what do you have? And one of the passages God spoke to me was the parable of the talents in Matthew 25. If you're not familiar with it, Jesus tells this parable. He says, a man on a journey. He called his servants together, and he entrusted them in his property. To one servant he gave 5 talents, to another he gave 2, and to another he gave 1, each according to his ability. The one who received 5 put them to work, and he gained 5 more back. The one that received 2 put his 2 to work, and he gained 2 more back. The one who received 1 talent took the money, and he went out and he dug a hole, and he put the money in the hole, and he buried it up, and kept it safe, and obviously didn't receive any more than that one that he had. And when the master comes back, his servants report what he did to the money with the money, and listen to what the guy who received the 1 talent says in verse 24 and 25. It says, he also, who received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid. And I went and hid your talent. Now, I've preached from that passage before about not burying your God-given gifts, your God-given talents, not burying them in the ground, but putting them to use, investing them in the kingdom. That's an important lesson that we learned from that parable. But this time around, as I read it, what jumped out at me was the reason why this man missed an opportunity. Why would we bury our God-given gifts? Why would we bury our dream? Why would we not dream at all? Why would we do this? Because he was fear that caused this man to miss his opportunity. Fear was the motivator that prevented this man from experiencing the more that God had for his life. If he had put that one talent to work, he might have got another talent back for it, and then God would have entrusted him with more. Instead, even what he had was him. Some of you guys need to hear this morning, because the only thing keeping you from stepping into your God-given dream or your destiny is fear. Now, you may not recognize it as fear, because fear is really good at disguising itself. Fear wears these different masks in our life. Fear hides behind lies that are disguised as wisdom or common sense. So fear makes you think that you don't need a dream in your life. That's for crazy people who risk too much. Big dreams are for really gifted people. That's one of the masks that fear wears. Fear convinces you that you won't be able to do it anyway, so why try and be disappointed? You're just going to fail. Fear tries to take you out of the game before you ever get started. We don't always identify it as fear. We identify it as like common sense. I can't do that. That's impossible. I'm just me. I don't have the education. I'm not smart enough. I'm from a small town. I couldn't possibly do those kinds of things. So it masks itself. And so we've got to keep this theme of God's protection in front of us. Otherwise, our default is fear. We'll default to fear. We'll cave to fear every time. It is our default mode. The Great Commission, Matthew 28, serves as this great mission statement for followers of Jesus Christ. Have you ever considered that there's two parts to this Great Commission that are most often overlooked? The two parts that are most overlooked have to do with God's protection and God's presence. See, we often focus, when we go to the Great Commission, we focus on verse 19 and the first half of verse 20. So we read it like this. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. That's a great mission statement for disciples of Jesus Christ. If you don't know what your dream is, start here. Start here. God wants you to be a disciple. He wants you to tell other people about Jesus. Help them grow in their faith. Teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. Help them. But we can easily miss that this great vision for discipleship actually starts in verse 18, which says, Then Jesus came to them and said, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. And the Great Commission doesn't end until the last part of verse 20, which says, And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. And so it just may be that these two neglected parts of the Great Commission, the parts that we often omit, may just be what's keeping us from making disciples effectively. Because the fear of making disciples overcomes us. And so we need the protection of God. We need the presence of God. We need to understand that the God who watches over us in Jesus Christ has all authority. And so if we walk with Christ, we have nothing to fear. Because He's not afraid of anything. And so His presence is with us as He promised, surely I am with you always to the end of the age. We don't need to fear. Very similar to the words that Jacob heard in his dream, where God said, I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go. You go with the protection of God. Both critical themes to keep in front of you as you walk toward the fulfillment of your dream. Romans 8:31, great verse to memorize. If God is for us, who can be against us? Who can be against us? The third thing we see in Genesis 28 is the provision of God. Verse 20, if God will be with me and will watch over me and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear. What's he talking about? He's talking about God's provision. The provision of God. Jacob's leaving home. He's heading out to the unknown. He's going to need the provision of God. I like to put it this way. When God gives you a vision, He always provides the provision for the vision to become reality. When God puts a vision or a dream inside of you, He always provides the provision to see that dream become reality. Now, He provides it in different ways. Sometimes we work for it. If you read Jacob's life, he works 20 years for his father-in-law. He works for the provision, and that's how God provides it for him. Sometimes the provision is just given to us. I've got a friend who's a pastor who, when he went to his most recent church that he's pastoring, they moved there, and it was expensive to move there, and they didn't have the funds were low, and their car was in need of repair. And they didn't know what they were going to do. And they said, God, you called us here. We got to fix our car. We don't know how we're going to pay for it. We really don't want to go to more debt. So somebody in his church comes to him one day and says, hey, can I get together with you? I'd like to talk to you about something. Now, when somebody says that to a pastor and they don't tell you what they want to talk to you about, it usually makes our stomach churn. So just tell me what you want to talk to me about, and then we'll get together. You know, you're not one of those. Hey, we need to talk. Okay. So he gets together with them and talks, and he's like, well, I've only been here a couple of weeks. It can't be too bad. I couldn't have messed things up too bad. The guy and his wife come, they sit down, and they say to him, I said, I had a dream. I had a dream. In my dream, God told me that I was supposed to give you my car. And I went and I shared it with my wife, who had the same dream. In her dream, God told her they were supposed to give them their car. Can you use a car? He said, absolutely. God's provision. How did it come? In a dream. I asked if I could share that story. He said, absolutely. I said, I'm preaching on dreams. I got to share this. Because God is so good. Because when He gives you the vision, He gave this guy the vision to go to this place. He gets to the place, this guy's going to afford for his car. God provides it. God provides it. Through a dream. Through two dreams that coincide and come together. So when God gives you the vision for something, He provides the provision to see the vision through to reality. Now, that provision of God is not just finances, that's one piece of it sometimes, but the provision of God also includes the gifts you need, the talents you may need, the power that you may need to see the vision through reality, the resources, the right people to come alongside you, etc., etc. You fill in the blank. Any provision you might need to see God's vision come to reality, He's going to provide it for you somehow. Philippians 4:19 says, and my God will supply every need of yours, according to His riches in glory in Christ Jesus. God has no needs. He has no needs. He's completely sufficient. He's completely sufficient. He's not up there trying to figure out how He's going to provide for your needs. He's got every resource available to Him. And my God will supply every need of yours according to His riches and glory in Christ Jesus. And then the fourth thing that you need to keep before you is the purpose of God. Verse 21, the purpose behind the vow that Jacob is making is so that I return safely to my father's house. Then the Lord will be my God. Why was it God's purpose for Jacob to return? We have to go back to the dream to get this one. It's found in verses 13 and 14. God says, I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. You will spread out to the west and east and north and south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and through your offspring. That's why Jacob went back. That was the purpose behind it. The purpose of the dream was to show Jacob that he would be a blessing to all the people on the earth. This was the same dream that he gave to his grandfather Abraham, the same dream that he gave to his father Isaac. And it gives Jacob a picture of how to go about being that blessing. I love it. The picture is found in verse 13 where he sees a stairway resting on the earth and its top reaches up to the heavens. And the angels of God are ascending and descending on it. Now you need to know that in the Bible, the word angels can also be translated messengers. Could be translated messengers. And I believe the picture that God was giving Jacob was one of not necessarily just these angelic beings that we can't identify with. I believe he was giving him a vision of God's messengers going out on mission and then returning. Out on mission and returning. Spreading the kingdom and returning. A picture of God's people bringing the atmosphere of the kingdom of heaven wherever we go. Living out the way that Jesus taught us to pray when He said, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I believe that's the picture that God was giving Jacob. That's the purpose behind what He was trying to do. That's the way that people get blessed. As we experience the manifest power and presence of God in our lives, and as we go and touch people's lives and bless them, they will become a blessing to other people. Now, it would end up taking 20 years before God would tell Jacob, it's time to go back. He works for his father-in-law Laban for 20 years, and Laban almost deters Jacob from accomplishing his dream. But if you turn to chapter 31, you'll see how keeping these four themes before him helps sustain him through every trial, through every challenge, through every hardship. Genesis chapter 31, verses 3 to 5. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers, to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out of the fields where his flocks were. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. There's the presence. There's the presence. It's keeping that in front of him. The God of my father has been with me. Verses 6 to 7, you know that while I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. There's the protection of God. There's the protection of God. Now, Jacob never said that the pursuit of the dream wasn't going to be hard. I think some people want the dream that somebody else has without putting in the work that somebody else has put in. Sometimes we look at other people who are living a dream that we would love to live, but we don't want the work that that person put in to get to that dream. Jacob never said the dream wouldn't be hard. Quite the opposite. He said he worked with all his strength. It was extremely hard, but God watched over him and protected him from his father-in-law. Verses 8 and 9. If he said, the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said, the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. There's the provision of God. Which, by the way, we're not going to go into detail on this story, but go back and read what Jacob did to get the flock to come out speckled and spotted. It was pretty amazing. I don't understand how God did it. I just know that he did it. But he took bark and he peeled it, he put it in front of their troughs when they were in heat, and as they looked at something that had stripes on it, they bore, flocks that had stripes. And I think that the point was, we become like that which is before us. If you've got a vision for who God wants you to be before you, that's what you become like. If you have nothing before you, guess what you become? I think that's the point. Not how God did it, but that God did it. There's provision. Verse 13, as he describes it, it says that as he's describing this dream that God gave him, he says, God said to me, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar. Notice God reminds him about the pillar right here. Keep it in front of you. And where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. There's the purpose of God. Go back to your native land. But there's only one problem. Esau is still back there. When he left 20 years ago, it was because he couldn't stay where he was. It was because Esau wanted to kill him. If he's going to keep this dream in front of him and go back and face Esau head on, he's going to need to be reminded of God's presence. He's going to need to be reminded of God's protection. He's going to need to be reminded of God's provision. He's going to need to be reminded of God's purpose. The reason this is so important for us to hear, guys, is because we all have an Esau back there going toward that dream that God has for us. We all have something standing in our way that we're afraid of, that we've got to get past in order to get to where God wants us to go. And in order to do that, we've got to keep His presence, His protection, His provision, and His purpose in front of us. So Jacob heads back, and he sends messengers ahead of him. And the messengers come back with the news for him. He said, Esau's coming. He's got 400 men with him. 400 men. So Jacob, in Genesis 32, 9 to 12, we read, then Jacob prayed. Good place to start. He has no idea what's ahead of him. He just knows Esau's coming with 400 men. Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. Notice he's keeping God's purpose in front of him, even in his prayers. He's keeping it in front of him as he's praying. God, you're the one that told me to go back to your country. You're the one that said, you'll make me prosper. Verse 10, I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you've shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed the Jordan, but now I've become two camps. Look what he's doing. He's keeping God's provision in front of him. He's reminding himself of all that God's provided for him. If you ever doubt what God might want to do in the future, just look at how God's provided for you in the past. I guarantee there's a whole bunch of provision behind you that you forget about if you don't keep it in front of you. And so he's remembering that in his prayer. Verse 11, he says, save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I'm afraid he'll come and attack me. And also the mothers with their children. So he's keeping God's protection in front of him. He said, God, I know that you can do this. I know you can protect me from this. Verse 12, he says, but you have said, I surely will make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. He goes back to God's purpose again. Then there's this amazing experience. That night he wrestles with God. And go and read it sometime in Genesis 32. He wrestles with God, and he won't let go until God blesses him. and God changes his name. It's a transformational moment. Because that's what happens when you're in the presence of God. Your life changes. And God changes his name from Jacob, the one who grabs the heel, the one who tries to get ahead by scheming, by deceiving, by all this stuff. He changes his name to Israel, one who's wrestled with God, one who's struggled with God and humans and has overcome. Jacob goes from a deceiver to an overcomer. Verse 30 says, "So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, 'It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared.'" There it is, the manifest presence of God. The four themes, they're always in front of him. They're always before him. The dream's always before him. And when he finally sees Esau coming toward him in chapter 33, verse 4 says that Esau ran to meet Jacob. I imagine this was a fearful moment for him. He doesn't know what to expect. But when Esau gets to Jacob, it says he embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. If that's not the kingdom of heaven invading earth, I don't know what is. That's transformation. That's a changed heart. God did something in that moment, took his brother from someone who wanted to kill him to someone who embraces him, to someone who weeps. It's reconciliation. It's reuniting. This was the beginning of Jacob being a blessing to all people. It started in his own family. It was the dreams and it was the themes that sustained him for the 20 years before he saw the dream become reality. Guys, don't give up on your dream just because it's taking a long time. Keep these things in front of you. Keep them where you can see them. It was the dream that sustained Jacob for all these years. It was the pillow that became the pillar that reminded him, God is with you. God will watch over you. God will provide for you. God will give you purpose. And these four themes should be present in any dream if the dream is truly from God. If the dream is truly from God, the presence of God will be there, the protection of God will be there, the provision of God will be there, the purpose of God will be there. And when those four themes are there, it will get you through any predicament that threatens that stand in the way of God's best for your life. Make this your pillar. Keep it in front of you and see it through. See it through.